Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today I'm proud to bring you Living Theurgy. And we have our theurgist here, and we will be continuing with our exploration of oaths. And Brandy Williams started this discussion with her suggestion. So I will go to Brandy now to introduce the topic again.
All right, part two. I have two odes that I want to read to us that are start the conversation. The first one is an oath that I took as a first degree witch. I'm Georgian, but it comes from the Gardnerian tradition, and it's from Lady Sheba's Book of Shadows, so it's published. The oath is, I, in the presence of the mighty ones, do of my own will and accord most solemnly swear that I will ever keep secret and never reveal the secrets of the art, except it be to a proper person, properly prepared, within a circle such as I am now in. All this I swear by my hopes of a future life, mindful that my measure has been taken, and may my weapons turn against me if I break this my solemn oath. And again, it's published. I'm not the source. I'm quoting. The second oath that I want to read is the 5th degree OTO oath. Again, this is published from Secret Rituals of the OTO. I pledge myself to the service of the order, to the last drop of my blood and the last penny of my purse. All this I swear to observe without evasion, equivocation, or mental reservation of any kind, were it at the cost of the death of my body and the damnation of my soul. And my question was, I knew at the time I was swearing to secrecy, that I was swearing to something that was published. And I knew at the time that I did the 5th degree oath that that's not really enforceable, nor was anybody expecting me to do that. It's a normal organization. I was asked to pay my dues, my membership dues, which was at its height, a couple $100. And I was asked to fulfill my obligations of volunteer obligations that for positions that I held. So there wasn't any weirdness about it, right? And when I left the organization, that no one has said anything to me about it, but I noted that I had broken that oath. And I said, so my question is, what do we think about that? And in particular, are oaths like this at all valid because they're not enforceable? That's my question.
And that is an excellent question. And last time, Brandy shared her thoughts, and Apollonius shared his thoughts, and Jean-Louis de Biasi shared his thoughts. And Apollonius is here, and we will go to him next, and he will summarize what he shared last time.
Oh, well, okay. What I shared last time was that I don't have too much to share because I do not participate much in organizations that require any sort of oaths. I think what I mentioned last time was using oath in a technical sense, not just as a way of saying a promise, for example. I take it more in the ancient fashion that when you swear an oath, you're basically calling down a curse upon yourself if you break the oath. You're basically saying to the gods, I ask you, if I break this oath, to do something really bad to me, and then you can spell out what the really bad is. And one of the interesting things that I hadn't thought of before, but comes up in connection with what Brandy said, is certainly in the ancient world, oaths were often public. I mean, that was, everyone, you were swearing it before the public, and everyone said, oh yeah, he said Zeus should strike him with a thunderbolt or whatever if he breaks this oath. And so it's a little bit different from nobody would even think twice about the oath itself being secret. But I can see that being different, with various sorts of secret orders where, or in certain political situations where you might not want it to be known generally that you had sworn this oath. But so anyway, that's really sort of my perspective on the thing, is that a true oath, in that sense, what I mean by a truth, should be a very serious thing. Doesn't mean you can't get out of it, but it means you have to call upon the same divine forces that you swore by to basically let you off the hook, presumably with a good reason. So I think that's a little different from basically swearing to be faithful to an organization, not to release their trade secrets, so to speak, and so forth. But that's really about all I think I can offer on this general issue. Like I said, I don't have a lot of experience with organizations that require oaths.
Thank you very much, Apollonius. So those are very good points. So now in like the business world, the entertainment world, people sign non-disclosure agreements, and then you can go after them in court if they break their non-disclosure agreement. But because that's been abused, now the question is coming up, how valid are some of these non-disclosure agreements? If they're asking you not to disclose something that's criminal or utterly ridiculous, that they're being challenged now. So this is a very topical discussion. Thank you very much. And now we proceed to Tony Mierzwicki, who just wrote an article on oaths in ancient Greek and has a lot of thoughts to share.
Okay, as Hercules just pointed out, I've written a blog on oaths, so it covers a fair bit of the material I wanted to talk about. I obviously can't cover everything in the blog because that would just take over the entire show. So I'm just going to pick out a few bits and pieces from my blog. So the ancient Greek word for oath was horkos. And so basically it was a solemn declaration placed under the guarantee of a superhuman power, which means either a god, goddess, or daemon that is charged with the punishment of perjury. So one could define an oath as an anticipated ordeal. The one taking the oath would stake something that was essential to him or her, some material possession, their kin, even their own life, in order to guarantee the veracity of their affirmation. In the Homeric language, horkos designates every kind of oath, the type which gives a guarantee of what one is going to do, a pact, or else the type which supports a statement relating to the past, these so-called judiciary oaths. And the thing is that in the institution of the oath, religion, morality, and the very organization of society appear to be indissolubly linked together. I've previously pointed out that the ancient Greeks didn't have a word for religion because it was seamlessly integrated. So here you've got an integration of oaths, religion, and morality together. So its function was to guarantee that a statement would be absolutely binding, whether it would be a statement about something in the past or a declaration of intent for the future. In a culture without writing, there are no records to act as proof, no legal documents. This function is of unique importance. Nevertheless, in the ancient high civilization, the written word was made only slow progress against the oath and never entirely displaced it. So it could be said that what holds democracy together is the oath. Now, the interesting thing about the oaths is that the ancient Greeks personified the oath, or horkos, as a sinister daemon, a spirit. It was a sanctifying object, one which has a potency which punishes every breach of the pledged word. According to Hesiod, horkos is the worst of the scourges for every terrestrial man who knowingly shall have violated his oath. So horkos was a personified spirit or daemon of oaths who punished perjurers. He was the son of Eris, which means strife, and the Erinyes of Furies assisted at his birth. He was also the punitive companion of the goddess Dike, or justice. So quoting from Hesiod and Works and Days, the better path is to go by on the other side towards justice, for Dike beats hubris, or outrage, when she comes at length to the end of the race. But only when he suffered does the fool learn this, for horkos keeps pace with wrong judgments. Hesiod in Works and Days wrote, "Beware of all the 5th days of the month, for they are harsh and angry. It was on the 5th, they say, that the Erinyes, or Furies, assisted at the bearing of horkos, whom Eris bore to be a plague on those who take false oath." So basically, Hesiod suggests that the 5th day of each lunar month is especially dangerous for perjurers, and this is also echoed by Virgil. I'm not going to read it out. It's in my blog if anyone wants to read it. Aesop, however, suggests that any day can be dangerous. So he quotes a particular story where a certain man took a deposit from a friend, but intended to keep it for himself. When the depositor then summoned him to swear an oath regarding the deposit, he realized the danger he was in and prepared to leave the city and go to his farm. When he reached the city gates, he saw a lame man who was also on his way out of town. He asked the man who he was and where he was going. The man said that he was the god named Horkos, and that he was on his way to track down wicked people. The man then asked Horkos how often he visited each city. Horkos replied, "I come back after 40 years or sometimes 30. Accordingly, on the very next day, the man did not hesitate to swear an oath that he had never received the deposit. But then the man ran into Hercules, who dragged him off to the edge of a cliff. The man asked Hercules how he could have said he wasn't coming back for another 30 years when in fact he didn't even grant him a single day's reprieve. Hercules replied, "You also need to know that if somebody intends to provoke me, I am accustomed to come back again the very same day." So basically what that says is it's not just the 5th of the month where perjurers have to be wary of Hercules. He can come back at any time. Herodotus quotes the Pythian priestess in Delphi about the dangers of perjury extending to the entire family. So there was a guy called Glaucus who journeyed to Delphi to question the oracle. When he asked the oracle whether he could seize the money under an oath, that is, money entrusted to him, which he had sworn to, the Pythian priestess threatened him in these verses. Glaucus, son of Epictetus, it is more profitable now to prevail by your oath and seize the money. Swear, for death awaits even the man who swears true. But Hercules has a son, nameless, he is without hands or feet, but he pursues swiftly until he catches and destroys all the family and the entire house. The line of the man who swears true is better later on. When Glaucus heard this, he entreated the god to pardon him for what he had said. The priestess answered that to tempt the god and to do the deed had the same effect. So the actual practice of an oath consists of the invocation of gods or daemons in a ritual that is stamped with an irrevocable character and often imprints an unforgettable experience of terror. So the ritual may involve grasping or casting away a staff or a stone. More memorable is the sinking of iron bars into the sea as an expression of utter irretrievability, as the Phocians did when they set out on their immigration, and as the Ionians still did in the year 478 to seal their alliance against Persia. Generally, the oath is accompanied by an animal sacrifice and libation. The libation comes very much to the fore in the case of the armistice and the peace treaty, which set an end to bloodshed. These are therefore quite known simply as spondi or libations. So typically Zeus, as the highest and strongest deities prominently involved in oaths, as Zeus Horkios. In addition, Athenians swear by Zeus, Apollo, and Demeter. Alternatively, they may swear by Zeus, Poseidon, and Demeter, or by Zeus, Athena, Poseidon, and Demeter. Aglauros, Hestia, the central of the polis, the warrior gods Enyo and Enyalios, Ares and Athena Area, Thalo and Auxio, sprouting and growth, as protecting powers over adolescence. Hegemone, the leader, and Heracles, the great prototype of the man who finds his way through the world with his own strength. And finally, the boundaries of the father world, wheat, barley, vines, olives, and fig trees, epitomizing the fruitful ancestral earth. From earliest times, objects could be elevated to the status of witnesses to an oath. Thus, Achilles swears by the staff, which will never again bear leaf, and Hera swears by the head of Zeus and her marriage bed. The oath sacrifice shares essential elements with normal animal sacrifice, but underlines the aspect of terror and destruction. I'm actually quoting Burkert here, Walter Burkert in Greek Religion, which is like the essential text on Greek religion. The blood is first made to flow into a vessel, and then the hands are plunged into the gore. Essential is the dismemberment of the victim. The person swearing the oath treads with his foot on the severed parts, which basically means the sexual organs of the male victim. Bloodshed is compounded with the horror of castration. This is accompanied by an act of self-cursing. Whoever is the first to do wrong against the oath, let his brains flow to the ground like this wine. It's quoting from the Iliad. Later, the customary imprecation is that utter destruction, or exoleia, should befall the oath breaker and his line. The extirpation of the family corresponds to the castration. Probably the best known oath that we have from ancient Greece is the Hippocratic Oath, which is an oath of ethics historically taken from the physicians. In its original form, it requires the new physician to swear by a number of healing gods to uphold specific ethical standards. The oath is the earliest expression of medical ethics in the Western world, establishing several principles of medical ethics which remain of paramount significance today. These include the principles of medical confidentiality and non-maleficence. The original oath was written in Ionic Greek between the 5th and 3rd centuries BCE. The oldest partial fragments of the oath date to around 275 CE. The oldest complete version dates to roughly the 10th to 11th century and is held in the Vatican Library. Contrary to common belief, it doesn't explicitly contain the phrase "first do no harm," which is often attributed to it. However, similar intentions are vowed by "I will abstain from all intentional wrongdoing and harm." I'm not going to read out the whole oath. I do have it in my blog if anyone's interested in it, but it starts with the words, "I swear by Apollo Healer, by Asclepius, by Hygeia, by Panacea, and by all the gods and goddesses, making them my witnesses, that I will carry out, according to my ability and judgment, this oath and this indenture." And then it goes on to basically do no harm, do all the right thing by everyone. So it's quite an amazing oath if people haven't read it. Another oath, which is fairly well known, is the Heliastic oath. And that was an oath sworn by jurors in the ancient Athenian. So the oath has actually been reconstructed by the German philologist Max Frankl, and he reconstructed the entire oath as follows: "I will vote according to the laws and votes of the Demos of Athenians and the Council of the 500, and concerning matters about which there are no laws, by the most just understanding and for the sake of neither favor nor enmity. And I will vote concerning the very matters about which the prosecution is, and I will listen to both accusers and defendants, both of them equally. I swear these things by Zeus, Apollo, and Demeter, and may I have good things if I swear well, but destruction for me and my friend if I forswear." So again, you've got this similar pattern where you're asking for good things to happen to you if you abide by your oath, but then you call on bad things to happen if you break your oath. So summing up, oaths were really effective in ancient Greece because most, if not all, people believed unflinchingly in the reality of the deities. The punishment of perjury was left up to the deities as they were the guarantors of the oaths, and the perjury was actually an offense against them. Binding by an oath was an invitation to possible divine vengeance, and it's a lack of belief in the divine in the modern age that leads to the need for legal intervention. So that sort of ties in with what you were talking about, how there are all these legal documents that have to be signed, they get challenged in court and the like. Back in the day, in ancient times, it was just a matter of calling down the wrath of divine and swearing that you would do the right things.
Awesome. That was very comprehensive and much broader than I imagined. In terms of some of the things you said, it's still called orkos. It means an oath, and it means swear. So if you curse, that's also you're swearing, and it's the same word that's used. When you're a kid, your parents will minorkizis, don't swear. So that's still used, and it's not that the ancient Greeks had no religion; they had a different sense of relationship with the powers. So there were three different words that were used to describe those relationships. One of them was thriskia, and thriskia is usually translated religion, and it's the rites that one performed to the gods, whether they be household gods or community gods or national gods or whatever. That was thriskia. It was a series of observances that people did as part of their community life. The other one was latria, which is usually used now, and I think it's a very unhealthy thing. It means slavish devotion. So it means when you worship something excessively or someone excessively, often to your detriment. So that was another relationship some people could have with gods, and especially with the introduction of Near Eastern gods, that became a practice. And then you had timi, which is to honor. So you honor the gods in your own particular way. Like I do timi. I don't do latria, and I don't really do thriskia either. But timi, I honor the gods by trying to do positive things in their sphere. So I do activity in whatever sphere they're responsible for, and that's what I do. And that's how I honor the Olympians. So.
Very good. Regarding threskia, I remember a few years ago there was a Greek guy who combined the worship of the ancient Greek gods with the practice of thelema.
hmm
It
Yeah,
was a
Theurgy means your will, your true will. So,
Yeah.
that's a very Greek concept. That's how you create in the world. That's how you make things happen. And it depends on whether your thelema is, coming from a low place or a high place, how holy or theurgic that happens to be.
cool.
Um, all that you shared, how can that help Brandy in her current situation of what to do with
Actually,
these?
I can talk a little bit if you want. I was thinking, Tony, as you read that this is why the tradition of oaths strikes pretty hard, and why it's very difficult for people who are in situations today. I think what Jean-Louis said was really important when he talked the first time. He identified the oaths that I read as coming from the Freemasonic oaths. And so it's not so much going back to ancient Greece, although it's really helpful to look at that, but that there's a particular framework that they came down to us in. And I was also thinking that even in ancient Greece, people broke oaths. Both you were talking about what happens if you swear a false oath, but what happens if you swear a true oath and then you discover that you have to break it, right? Which is my situation, or a lot of people's situation, right? And you know that this happened because the Assyrians had a way to deal with this. There's a ritual, Mesopotamian ritual called shrupu, where I don't know if you guys know about this, but shrupu is where you invoke a bunch of deities and you say, I did all of this stuff wrong. And it goes on for a day. And there's one whole section about oaths. So it's like, I invoke the god Asaluhi, who helps me to get out of oaths that I need to get out of. Here are the oaths, and then it just lists them, right? So you do it at a sort of a way to handle that. And I think that's the topic, is like, how do you handle when an oath like feels oppressive, but you have to get out of it? And I know that there were ways that happened in ancient Greece too. Somebody can help me remember, because in the Eleusinian mysteries, you weren't allowed to go to the Eleusinian mysteries if you had murdered or if you had broken an oath, but there was a way that you could get that off of you and still go into the mysteries. And I don't remember exactly what that was.
The lesser mysteries. They were created by Persephone for Hercules, who did have a criminal record, I guess you could say, so that he can undergo the Eleusinian mysteries and descend to the underworld. So that's what they did. They were open to people who had checkered pasts and wanted cleansing.
Yeah, that was essentially a purification process,
Mm-hmm.
which is a little different because I think trying to get out of an oath is more of an unbinding process. I mean, if you think of an oath as a binding spell of a sorts, then what you're really trying to do is a kind of unbinding, which I think is a little different from the typical situation like Hercules and the Eleusinian mysteries, which is more of a purification process. They certainly are not independent, but I think it's a little bit different.
It's interesting that you should refer to an oath as a binding. I seem to remember a spell in the PGM where Selene is talked about going into the underworld and breaking oaths, breaking bindings. So possibly you may be able to call on Selene in order to break an oath that you would otherwise be bound by. But again, I think that you would need to have righteousness on your side, as Brandy said.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, and Hercules, you said the last time we talked that you had an idea about Athena and someone else, maybe Ares, who you appealed to if you had to get out of an obligation.
Oh, I address whatever deity I think is appropriate, and I explain how I can't meet a particular promise I made, or an oath or a vow. Although again, I avoid those, and basically explain my circumstances, and then wait to see what happens. In my thinking, life is the great initiator, and if life decides that that wasn't good enough, I'll know about it through the events that transpire as it unfolds. But a lot of times I'll get a sense of relief, and I live in a generally compassionate universe that's not out to get me. So I find the universe very understanding. But you have to have an open heart, I guess, and just to explain what's going on. And I try to do extra whenever I can. So if you think of it karmically, I have like a balance there. I can pay my karmic bills as I go along. But there have been times in my life when I've had to break a promise. It just circumstances would not allow me to complete it, or things changed very radically. I've been married before, for instance, so I had to nullify those vows because that situation did not work out. I've been with Athena now for 19 years. We've been together for over 20. And next year's our 20th anniversary. So the third time's a charm. But there were two before that didn't quite work out the way I intended or would have liked, or they would have liked either. So we had to dissolve that and move forward with it. And I believe life has been very compassionate with me in that regard. My son from my first wedding, he and I are very close, phenomenally close. And, there's a lot of love and open communication between us. So I'm very grateful to him, to his mom, and to the universe for, allowing me to have that. And if it was not a good thing I did, or if I didn't try to, trying to make the best out of a bad situation, I don't think I'd have that relationship. So.
And, it kind of reminds me of something that Jean-Louis said too. There was a mention of blood in one of these oaths, and Jean-Louis said, there's no reason for us to be doing blood oaths in the 20th century.
I agree.
And so I looked it up online, and I discovered that there's a cult. I'd like, well, okay, how do you get out of a blood oath then? And there's a whole culture where people swear blood oaths to their partners, and then that relationship doesn't go so well. Like, how do you get out of that? So, yeah. So on the list, Apollonius said, on the list of things not to swear oaths to individuals and organizations, perhaps also blood oaths to lovers might make that list. So what they did, what they suggested was you write out the oath and swear it in blood, that you rescind that, right? So that was the cultural suggestion there. But it's also interesting, that we use these ways to bind. And then there, my thought is, there is no unbreakable oath. There can't be, because like you said, Hercules, life is the great initiator. I mean, you don't know, I don't know at this point what's going to happen in 20 years that might put me in a position where I might have to do something other than what I promised. So I think that there has to be a way. We give oaths because we genuinely mean it at the time.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not talking about, I promise, and you're keeping your fingers crossed behind your back. I think that's what Tony was talking about. People who genuinely know, they go into making an oath knowing that they mean to defraud, and Hercules will get you. And I think that's really appropriate. The Erinyes will get you. But if you genuinely don't, and you've grown, there has to be a way to move beyond that. And I think that's the thing that I want to tell people, because I do have a lot of these conversations. I have conversations with witches who say, I feel bound by the oaths that I gave. I feel bound to the laws of the craft, the ordains. And the ordains say that I can only initiate a person who's the opposite gender of me. That assumes for one thing that there are only two.
Right.
Like, okay, now I have a friend who's a woman who wants to initiate a woman, and she doesn't know how, because she's made that oath, right? So I'm looking for ways to make give in that absolute, that you have to do it, that's what I'm looking for to help the people that I'm talking to.
I think there's a balance there, right? Because you don't want oaths to be sworn with little consideration of like, oh yeah, sure, I'll swear to that. But on the other hand, as you say, there are circumstances where it's the right thing to do to get out of the oath. And you've got, I think it should be difficult, in some sense, high expense to get in, and then also even higher expense to get out. And that's what keeps oaths believable, as opposed to just the sort of casual or even dishonest sort of oaths that you mentioned.
And also we still have, and this has been coming up in the news a lot lately, people swear oaths in court, and if they lie, they're committing perjury, which is a punishable offense. So oaths are still taken very seriously and should be respected.
And that's an interesting example, because we still, although you don't have to do it, but we still traditionally swear on a Bible or on some holy book. And it goes back to that idea of as in the oath that Brandy read, I'm committing myself to eternal damnation if I perjure myself. And when people really believed that, that was a serious thing for them, and made them very inclined to tell the truth. But now it's just part of the ceremony that basically is acknowledging you're going to be in legal trouble if you're discovered to have perjured yourself.
And you could be locked up and pay steep fines, for doing so.
The impression that I got when I was going through all the material on oaths in ancient Greece was that they were treated far more seriously than they are now. Like, for instance, if you were initiated into the mysteries, to reveal anything which you had learned was punishable by death. There are cases of people who would, basically lose everything or have to sacrifice a daughter if they broke an oath. Whereas these days, by comparison, to perjure yourself leads to a slap on the wrist. And I think, as I said before, I think what it comes down to is that people had a far stronger belief in the gods and felt more bound by the caprices of the gods and treated their oath seriously, whereas these days that doesn't seem to be the case. It almost seems like, how the Catholics have two sorts of sins. You've got the mortal sins and the venial sins. Seems to me that if you're going to bind yourself to an oath, there are certain oaths that can't be broken, but there are some oaths that might have a little bit of wiggle room, if that makes any sense. So, for instance, what Brandy was saying, that there was a woman who felt that she couldn't initiate another woman because it was the same gender, which, as she pointed out, presupposes that there are only two genders, whereas it's basically a sliding scale. I mean, something like that seems to have wiggle room in it, but to actually reveal inner order secrets, I mean, that's something that shouldn't be allowed under any circumstances.
I think it's really important for us to say right now that we all don't approve that you would have to sacrifice your family to a broken oath. I saw that go by. I'm like, no, don't throw the oath. But actually, Tony, I'm actually talking about a really different case than that. I'm talking about an oath that isn't possible, right? Like, yes, I think it's probably true that you should not reveal a mystery. But if the mystery is already revealed and then you promise not to reveal it, is that oath actually a valid oath? And this is true in the modern world. There are no, I mean, Karl Weschke said, I've published all the secrets. There aren't any in the Western tradition. Jean-Louis said he has secrets. So if I take Jean-Louis' initiations, I will not, publish his initiations, right? But I'm in reading these oaths out loud, I'm not the person who's breaking the secrecy, right? It's already broken. So there are oaths that can't be kept even as you're swearing them. And that's kind of what I was talking to.
You bring up a very interesting point, and that conversation has come up a lot. I've been involved in a project for I don't know, years now, a bunch of little projects, and, they've been unfolding at their own rate. And the subject of oaths comes up, fairly often, and how other magicians deal with them. Some are purists and they insist on the oaths, some are flexible. I feel we should just avoid the oaths and have guidelines, for good behavior or ethical behavior. But what many magicians do is, if it's published, if it's in the public domain, then they could talk about it, not in relation to the organization that gave them the insights or what secrets they obtained. So they won't tie it to that organization. But if it's in the public domain, if it appeared on a TV show, if it's been published in a book, then that you can just quote and refer to the TV show or the book. So that's how they get around those type of oaths, because they're not revealing anything given to them by the organization. It played on Buffy in an episode of Buffy, or whatever.
Yeah.
It does seem to me that this is something that any organization that does have a system of oaths and sort of official secrets and things like that, the powers that be within the organization really ought to sit down and have a policy about things like this, say, yeah, I mean, our oaths, for example, have all been published. So, you're not breaking any oaths by, revealing the oaths. And they ought to have policies for how you get out, if you want to retire from the organization, what's an official way of doing that. And again, the initiating people of the opposite gender, well, that was from a different time, and you can't feel obliged to keep every ritual and every practice the same as it was 100 or 200 years ago or more. So, the folks in charge, in the upper orders, need to, have work those things out, I think, to just have some sensible policies, it seems to me.
And John Louis said that as a Freemason, he's gone back to his Freemason brethren and said, we shouldn't be doing this. And they said, well, it's kind of traditional. He's like, yeah, let's just change that. And so he's changed it, right? This is happening in the magical orders. So I took Golden Dawn oaths that do not resemble the oaths that were given to the people at the beginning of the Golden Dawn, right? Because we've learned. I mean, the oaths that I made for Sisters of Seshat, the initiate says, I swear by the power of this initiation that I'll finish this initiation. That's like as far as we go. And also, I'm sort of working up to a blog post actually about the way that I see oaths being worked now and how they're restraining people, and ways that we can make oaths, and then ways that we should really like pull up. Like Apollonius said the last month, don't swear to an individual or an organization. I said, yeah, why did I do that? And then also someone said, in ancient Greece, they were public, and Apollonius said, you should have a hard time getting into it. Some of these initiations, they spring the oath on you in the initiation. So you don't really have a chance to agree to it. And there's this sense of duress, right? So I think one of my rules is, if you've sworn an oath under duress, it's not a valid oath, right? My favorite example is when I went to a White Tara initiation that the God and Chartsi monks gave. Have I told you guys this story? This is great. A group of us came and we took the empowerment, and they said, okay, now repeat after us. And they said stuff in Tibetan. And at the end, they said, surprise, that was the Bodhisattva vow. And now you're all, signed to the Bodhisattva vow.
Well, that's an interesting thing. Can you be an unwilling Bodhisattva? I guess you can.
Yeah.
When will they all ascend? Let this nightmare end.
Yeah, well, as however many sentient beings there are, I vow to remain myself reincarnating until everybody is enlightened. I actually heard a Buddhist woman, Lopan Chandra Easton, address that and said, nobody takes that seriously. What it means is you vow to help people, right? And so there is this sense that these great vows that you take, there's some wiggle room there. But we decided that if we took a vow in Tibetan that we didn't know what it was, it's not a binding vow, right? So
it sounds like the Scientologist's billion-year contract.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's a very serious thing, right? I mean, it's something that people really do feel, even though that's we know it's metaphorical, right? I mean, my tools are not going to turn against me. They haven't done that. Even so, it really does sort of impact people on an energetic level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have a story to share. Let's see how much time we have. Oh, we have time.
Oh, you have time.
When I was, I don't know, maybe I was in high school. Back then I was very clairvoyant and clairaudient, and a lot of times, the dead and the nature spirits were the two things that I was in tune with, like all the time. I could see them all the time. And I was a deep trance medium for a theosophical spiritual group that later became the norm, although Blavatsky would have been mortified that spiritualism had been joined with theosophy. But anyway, so it was during a storm. It was a really big storm that I somehow wound up out of body. And I guess I would have died if I must have fallen asleep or fallen down or something. But I had this really bizarre experience with nature spirits, and I met a blue being who's like the sky. And I talked to the blue being for quite a while, and the blue being asked me to do certain things. So I said I would do those things, and then I found myself in my body covered with snow, and I walked the rest of the way home. It was like in the middle of the night, and the buses had stopped running, so I had to be let off like really far. It was the middle of a blizzard, and I had to walk a great deal. So anyway, that's how I wound up in that circumstance. So I've never forgotten this, but the things that happened to me seemed even stranger than the things I choose to share through my writings. They were really like way out there. And of course, it became like, how do I possibly share this? It has been published, so I've kept that part of it. You know, it's on my website somewhere, you know, under Hellenic community, I think, or Olympian community. There's like a page devoted to it. I've referred to it countless times. I speak about it every now and then, but I never really go into the experience. So my initial account and then my 25-page longer version disappeared like years ago. And lately, the blue god started appearing again through synchronicities. So I'm covering the synchronicities on the podcasts and the Zoom shows. So I've done something on maces. I've done something on the Phoenix, which we started a little. Now we're going to do more on Sunday. So I'm getting all this background information out. And Zontar Press likes my stuff. Paranoia Press used to, but I haven't heard from them in a while. So I was thinking of getting out all the background information to this, and then like taking that 25 pages, because it showed up miraculously. The 25 pages and the original notes showed up, you know, when I had no idea where they were for years. So anyway, so the universe and this blue god are telling me to move ahead and just share the information. And in this series of things I agreed to was to get more involved with nature and the environment. So I've done that. I've sat on environmental commissions. I'm an advocate of protecting animals, and I've written stuff for local newsletters, and I've gone to protests. And you know, so it's not that I didn't do these things, but I guess I didn't do these things to the extent that they needed to get done. So again, since I'm now in the autumn of my life, or maybe the winter of my life, I want to do them, you know, to fulfill that obligation. So I still haven't figured out how, but I'll just move forward and do my best, and you know, hope that that'll suffice. But I do plan on publishing the 25 pages, maybe expanding them even bigger, maybe putting them, you know, putting them in one of Zontar Press's books. Who knows? I'll do something with it. But I feel that I feel the need to do that. And looking back on my life, I left the occult group shortly thereafter I turned 18. Because of a variety of reasons. The thing that bothered me most was, even though I believed that my channelings were true, I wasn't making the stuff up. Adult people who should be making their own decisions were basing the decisions out of what came out of my mouth. And that bothered me. So I felt that, you know, adult human beings should make their own decisions, that it was fine to consult with spirits or gods or outer space aliens or whatever you wanted to talk to. And the insights there were good. They were to take you outside of your box, so you consider like other options. But ultimately and eventually, the decisions need to be made by you. Because even if you're talking to a higher being and the higher being has faculties way beyond you, it's still expressing its opinion. So it's good to have that opinion and to weigh it into what you have to do, but you're responsible for your life. So I left that and, you know, moved on into the world, which is supposed to be a horrible place, but it's an exciting, wonderful place. So anyway, so I'm trying to figure out how to weave that in, and I'm glad that whatever promises I made, I wasn't held to them more literally until this point in life, because at this point in life, a lot of things that never made sense are starting to make sense, and things that seem disconnected seem connected, things that seem random seem planned by a mind not my own, you know, in terms of giving me certain types of experiences that led to certain insights that I now find very useful. And the things that the occult group wanted me to do that I said no to, now I'm finding that I may actually have to do some of these things to make this come about. So that's the irony of life. So I realize I'm being sketchy, but and I'll share a little bit more. This blue being is the Hercules of Tyre, known as Melkart by some. He's Melikarthes in Greek. He incorporates the Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades into one being, kind of. And his club or hammer is the mace, and that fits into what I've been going through during this part of my life as well. So I will happily, integrate this and do something with it. I've been mentioning Melkart a bit more, so hopefully it'll lead to something very interesting and helpful to people.
So Hercules, I wanted to ask you, is
Sure.
this the Hellenistic compound deities, but a modern version of it, or I'm just trying to get a grip on it?
According to Herodotus, this was an older version of Hercules, and other historians whose names I don't recall right now have mentioned it also. And Nonnus, who was a late, I think, 5th century AD writer, he wrote the Theosyniaca, and in there's an encounter with the Hercules of Tyre, and he's called star-clad Hercules. And Dionysus brings him a gift, and they have a conversation where he reveals all these things about Tyre that no one knew. He gives him nectar and ambrosia, and then Dionysus goes on his way to have the adventures that he's having in this multi-volume series of books. So that version of Hercules, which is more ancient than the Greek version of Hercules, exists today and popped up again during the neo-theosophical movement as the Hercules of Theosophy. In Blavatsky, she covers the relation with the zodiac and makes a couple of comments that are interesting, and took me many years to unlock what they meant. But Alice Bailey furthered the zodiac type of tradition. But the I Am movement, which is a theosophical branch, they started channeling Hercules. And there's like a green book put out by the Saint Germain people, and then there's a white book put out by the foundation, the Bridge to Freedom. And there's a lot of information. Then there's some in the yellow book. There's all these like colored books that are floating around that were not available or not readily available when I was doing my deep trance mediumship. Otherwise I would have found them, and it would have answered a lot of my questions. As it was, I had to wait years before they started circulating and I could locate them. But it's a continuation of late antiquities Hercules, which is indeed an earlier version than the Greco-Roman version of Hercules. And he's already been anchored in this world that we live in since at least the 50s. So that's what it is.
I have to laugh because when you were talking about doing deeds trance mediumship with the Theosophical group in a blue being, I wasn't really relating to it. And the second you said Hercules, went, oh, I know what he's talking about. And it sort of fits in the theurgic format. It was very funny. That's lovely. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, I'm going to start sharing it. So I figure I'll share it more here. I'll connect it better here a little bit. I've been leaving all these hints in there. They're just kind of straight comments right now, but I'm moving in that direction definitely. So why not just get it out in the open?
And you put it in the context of you made a promise, and I think that we can park this, but it's a really interesting conversation to have when a deity comes to you and asks you for stuff. That's a little bit different than the kind of vow that we've been talking about, but it's something that I train students all the time, like how you respond in that moment. You don't really want to, like, the moment that a theophany occurs and the deity is there and you're so thrilled the deity has paid attention to you, you're like, take my life. Hold back.
Hold back,
Restrain yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd love us to talk about that some more.
I've
Let me
never
think
shared,
about it.
I've never
Yeah,
shared
think
this
about it.
story, but I'll share it here. This was something that happened when I was in my teens, some point, I think in my late teens. I started, that's when some people from Athos started talking to me.
Mm.
That I've shared. And one of the topics was my blue being, because by that time I'd identified who it was, and I was sure who it was. And, they told me that there is no Baal Melkart, there's only Satan, and that the teachers that I encountered in my dreams were demons, and, all that type of stuff. So around the time when I was having those conversations, I started having these dreams, or like hypnagogic type of things, where the being that I was talking to was like locked in a brass room, and he was trying to get out. So he was like pounding himself, against the room trying to get out. And it was very confusing because here I am being told that this entity that I've been communicating with was a demon, and then I'm getting all these demonic type of experiences of being locked in like metal chambers, and it sounded very Arabian Nights type of thing. So yeah, I thought about, well, what do I do? So the conclusion I came to after thinking about it for a long time was that this being has been nothing but helpful to me. And he's never told me not to look into things or to believe certain things or not to believe certain things. In fact, he encouraged me to study, anything I could and to find out for myself. So if I'm to judge this being, it can't be on the words of others. And if he's stuck inside a metal jar or whatever, how do I get him out? So I started wondering like what I could possibly do to help him. And I sincerely like meditated and tried doing astral projection, tried doing all sorts of things to get him out of his metal box. And then that stopped. And he said that no one's ever done that before. And he said that he's not stuck in a metal box. And it was just to basically see what I would do if I'm being given negative feedback. Do I trust my own experiences and my own experience and my own thoughts, or do I trust the words of someone in authority who tells me that what I'm experiencing is false? So it was a test, but again, very interesting, very different. And that's why I think life will bring these things out. If you join an order, or if you join a group, or if you study a particular path, it's very helpful. And especially if you have resonances with it, and it'll bring you to certain places and it'll help you get certain realizations. But if you don't pick an organizational path, that these things will happen to you anyway, except it'll use a symbolism of daily life and the occurrences of daily life to lead you to some of the same, understandings.
But you may not have a framework or a context
Right.
of understanding it. You'll have to work that out yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's why I don't buy into the everything secret needs to be made known, because if I could locate all this obscure information, it's available in bookstores, on the internet, in casual conversations, through synchronicities. This information will get to you if you need it, and it'll get to you in some particular way through the natural course of events. I guess that's a conversation for another day, but I trust life to teach you what you need to learn. Brandy, since you brought up the question, and everyone has shared the treasures of their insight and understanding, is there any other question you'd like to ask anybody, or would anybody like to ask Brandy anything?
I just want to say thank you to all of you. You've all spent so much time on this and brought so much wisdom. Tony and Apollonius and Jean-Louis, who's not here, and Hercules. It's been really helpful. It's been I've been sharing it with the people that I'm talking to, and you've given us all a lot of things to think about. But I really appreciate having the collected wisdom brought to bear on this, and especially this last thing you said, Hercules. It's very wise. I really appreciate having this forum where we can talk about things like this. It's very helpful. So thank you all.
I appreciate it too, and I look forward to all of you. Okay, if no one else has anything to say, I will close the program. And again, I apologize for the abruptness of it, but I can't find the other options. Thank you. You're all incredibly awesome. And as always, I learned a lot, and I look forward to our next conversation ready. Before we close, Brandy's show is launching in January.
In January, yes, Witchcraft and Theurgy, and we have booked Don Frew. Isn't that exciting? So I'm very thrilled. Don sat on one of the first Theurgicon panel with Tony, and Apollonius also went to one of the Theurgicons. So he was the person who wrote a piece about witchcraft and theurgy, and I'm really glad to have him to launch the series. And
Llewellyn's published a book on the Greek gods and witchcraft. So I've asked them for a review copy, and also if we can interview the authors. And I mentioned your show is one of the places where we can interview the authors. And then people have been contacting me, all sorts of Hellenic and Greek god witches. That doesn't sound right, but anyway, Greek god honoring witches. And so we have plenty of people for a guest list, and it'll lead to the panel that we're discussing a lot quicker. So I'm looking forward to that. And Tony might be on one of the Wednesdays between now and the end of the year. to lead into Brandy's show. And Apollonius, if you would like the fourth Wednesday in December to do a show on anything you'd like, I would love to give it to you.
Great. Well, do you don't know what the date of that is offhand?
I don't, because if I go to my computer's.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, I'm in the same
Okay.
situation. I
Yeah,
think
me
that
too.
that's good, but let me check.
Okay,
I'd
sure.
love to do it.
It's
I'd love
December
to do it.
28th.
Okay, December
Number
20.
28th. Okay. Yeah,
Always have a
that'll-
paper calendar. I'm old. I have paper.
Oh, paper.
Me too. I just
Doesn't even need a battery.
calendars. Okay, thanks again to everybody. Happy Thanksgiving, and I'll be talking to you all soon. Be well.
You too. So long.
Thanks.